Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Malice in the Mitten. I am your host, Tracy Preston, along with my bestie, Christine Mulligan. Hey, Christine.
Hey, Trace. Hey, everybody. You ready for another one?
We are so ready. All right, so let's get into it. This is season 2, episode 14, Tara Grant. Tara was born in 1972. She had a sister named Alicia that was 2 years younger than she was. They grew up on a farm in the Upper Peninsula where they had just about every animal you could imagine. Horses, sheep, cows, pigs, goats, guinea hens, rabbits, turkeys, chickens, and geese. They also loved to make maple syrup. Both Tara and Alicia were no strangers to hard work, especially with all those animals. There were plenty of chores to be done. Tara attended Michigan State University and graduated with a bachelor's degree in business. Tara had met her husband Stephen at MSU. He aspired to become a politician. After college, Tara and Stephen were married, and by 2007, they were living in an upscale neighborhood northeast of Detroit. They had 2 children, a daughter who was 6, and a son who was 4 years old. Tara landed an amazing job with Washington Group International, which provides engineering, construction, and management services to businesses and governments around the world. In the 10 years Tara was employed, she successfully climbed the corporate ladder and now held a senior management position, pulling in a 6-figure income. The entire 10 years she was there, she never missed a single day of work. Tara's job required her to travel out on Monday and fly home on Friday. And at this point in time, her work took her to Puerto Rico. Not a bad place to be in the dead of winter here in Michigan. Stephen was not as successful as his wife financially. With Tara having to travel frequently for work, Stephen was the stay-at-home dad. He was very involved with the children and even coached their soccer team. Stephen didn't really have much of a career, nor did he have the drive his wife did. He would work here and there at his father's tool and die shop. It was Tara that was the breadwinner of the family. Now, I'm not sure when the au pair came into the picture, but they had one. She was a 19-year-old German girl named Verena Dierkes. She was hired through an agency and was sent to live with the Grants from Germany. Now, according to Discovery ID's Scorned, Love Kills, it looks like they had a few different au pairs, but it was Verena that was the last. Stephen was feeling emasculated, left out, tired of doing dishes and being Mr. Mom. He was lonely and started to drift into fantasy land, thinking that these au pairs were into him. He had said to a friend of his that he was out doing yard work one day, and when he looked up, he saw the au pair changing her clothes in front of the bedroom window. She hadn't noticed Stephen standing outside gawking at her like the perv he is, so he just stood there and stared. So creepy, dude.
Okay, so he thought the au pairs were into him, and his wife travels all the time?
Yep.
All right, I'm already feeling icky.
Yeah, I really don't think he was doing yard work. I'm thinking he was sneaking around, looking in the window with probably a rake in his hand, pretending like, oh, if I get caught, I'm just really doing, raking some leaves or doing some yard work. Lies.
So he was peeping Tomming. He was peeping Tomming on his own house, on his own au pair.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying.
That's what you're saying to me?
Yeah. He's a total creepoid.
Oh, no. Oh, goodness.
I know. Oh, well, guess
what?
what?
The neighbors were the ones that seen him peeping in his own windows?
No. He was just bragging that, oh.
Oh, my God, he was telling people this?
Yeah, man.
Oh, my God.
He's gross. Okay. He's gross. He's so gross.
Okay, this is weird.
Yeah. Well, you know what's even more weird is he drilled a hole through the wall into the au pair's bedroom so he could watch him dress, undress, sleep, read, whatever he wanted, whenever he felt like it.
Well, how did we discover that?
It was in the show.
Okay.
They showed that he had a hole drilled in the wall.
Oh my goodness! So he was bragging to people that he thought they were into him, that he saw them undressing through his own windows of his own house,
while
he stood out in his yard and peeped in on his au pairs.
Yeah, like he's just, oh, I'm just raking leaves. Oh, look at
Yeah.
there.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't buy it. He was lying.
Oh.
He was peeping. During the week, as Tara, his wife, right, she's working in Puerto Rico. Stephen was home at night drinking a few beers, feeling all lonely and sneaky. And he decided that he would go through some of Tara's things. He had found one of her laptops and started nosing his way through her emails. Now, the show on Discovery mentioned that the emails were between Tara and a male co-worker, possibly even her boss. And they were a little bit on the racy side, and to Stephen, it sounded like, there was a relationship going on. Reading these emails fueled his emasculation and, of course, made him angry. At the same time, I think he cared but didn't care. He was beyond smitten with Verena, their current au pair, and pretty much on the daily he was interacting with her more and more. And I mean, they were the only adults in the home during the week. He would pour sweet comments all over Verena, locking eyes with her, and soon he'd reach over and, like touches on the hand. And it seemed like every day he would ramp up his pursuance of Verena. He was straight up grooming this girl. That's what he was doing.
Or at least this girl was not as creeped out as all the other au pairs, because they went through a few.
Yeah.
They were like, ew, creepy. Mm-hmm. This guy's creeping me out. But Verena apparently wasn't creeped out. Verena was like, okay.
Yeah, and,
Okay.
You got to remember that these girls are young, right? An au pair comes to you usually from another country, and this girl was 19 years old, from Germany, very naive, very young. What does she know? She doesn't know anything. At the same time, Stephen was also reaching out to an ex-girlfriend of his through his email. And this is something that he usually did once a year over the last 10 years. So throughout the entire marriage, every year he tends to reach out to this ex-girlfriend just to kind of check in, right? So it's kind of one of those things, hey, how you doing? But it's weird. Why are you reaching out to an ex-girlfriend on the annual? I don't like it. But this time, he was walking outside the lines a little bit, sounding like a junior high school boy with his weird innuendos, like, you could give me a sponge bath. She was a nurse. Again, ew. She probably just tolerated his annual emails, but now I'm sure she's like, yuck. She didn't feed into him, so that basically went nowhere. And she never deleted that email from him. When Tara was home for the weekend, the tension was palpable. They just weren't seeing eye to eye. Stephen would be complaining that she was traveling too much for work and that she needed to be home more with him and the kids. Tara had a very important job, which it sounds like she was amazing at it. And when she was home, she was present with the kids. But with Stephen, things were shifting. On another week while Tara was away, Verena and Stephen were sitting on the couch watching a movie together while the kids were sleeping. Stephen started to become more physically assertive with Verena. He'd reach out, touch her foot gently, pull it to his lap, and gently started to rub her feet. Did I say grooming?
Yeah, you say grooming. Now we're just getting to the literal part of grooming.
Yeah, yep. So he started confiding in Verena and showing her the emails that he had found between Tara and her coworker, playing the victim, playing the hurt husband. No, sir. Again, you're grooming. Pulling this young girl into your bullshit, working on her emotions to get her to feel bad for you. Well, it was working. She began to let her guard down, and before long, she was falling for him. It wasn't long before Stephen and Verena were kissing and ended up in the marital bed where Stephen performed cunnilingus on Verena. After the tryst, she had left the room, and I'm sure it was crazy weird for her. I mean, she's only freaking 19. He's in his mid-30s. She's living in their house. She's here from Germany, and what a crazy situation he put this girl in.
Okay, well, I know you know the rest of the story. So I feel like you're injecting a little bit of that fervor into their little tryst. But she's 19. Yes, that's young, but it's she's an adult. And he's in his mid-30s. So, I just want to put it out there for the listener that it doesn't sound super icky, yicky. It's not a case of pedophilia. She is an adult, and it is an age gap, nearly 20 years between them, and it's not necessarily ew until it's ew. But because she is naive and from Germany, so yes, I get you that he's grooming her, but she is an adult, so she is making these choices. And hey, cunnilingus it's not a bad thing.
It's true. I just think he's disgusting. He's disgusting. Now, it was either later that night or another night when Stephen called for Verena to come to his bedroom. He was standing there, only wearing pajama bottoms, but dropped them to the floor according to Verena's testimony and basically said, "You've seen it all now. We might as well have sex." Verena did an about face, but it wasn't long before she came back. And Stephen had his conquest, and I'm sure he felt like he was on top of the world. But the end of the week was approaching, and soon Tara would be home. Friday, February 9th, had arrived. Stephen was home this day, and Verena basically had the day off. She was having a meetup with some other au pairs that lived in the area and didn't really say when she'd be back. Now, I'm not sure if Stephen also wanted her out of the house when Tara came home that night. The more I think about it, the more I think he had a plan. While Tara was waiting at the airport to go home, Tara had been talking to her sister, Alicia, and she was her usual upbeat self. During the conversation, Tara had mentioned that she would be home for the weekend, but would be flying back to Puerto Rico Monday morning. Tara arrived home sometime Friday night. The kids were already in bed. Tara and Stephen were bickering in their bedroom, which was pretty much par for the course lately. Tara was unpacking from her business trip, and while unpacking, she had told him that she had to head back to Puerto Rico on Sunday instead of Monday. And this teed Stephen off, and their conversation became a yelling match. Tara turned to walk away, but Stephen grabbed her wrist to keep her from walking away. She quickly turned and slapped him in the face. Then, bam! Stephen hit her right back and knocked her to the floor. She said, "That's it. I'm leaving you." She packed her bag, called her car service, and left.
Is this the first knockdown, drag out, literally?
Mm-hmm.
We hear about them, or is there more to come how they were physically fighting?
Yeah, there's more to come.
Okay.
But we're not going to touch that just yet. So Stephen couldn't believe what had just happened. He put on a shirt, and he was walking out of his bedroom when Verena walked in the house. Stephen came out yelling, quote, "What the fuck are you doing back already?" He began to tell Verena that he and Tara had gotten into a fight. So he thought that was Tara coming back in the house, but it was really Verena. So he began to tell her that, they got into a fight because she said she had to turn around and go back to Puerto Rico, that she packed her suitcase and she called the car service and just left. Well, Verena felt really bad for him, and the two of them spent the night cuddling and hugging. This went on for days. And it wasn't until 5 days later, which was Valentine's Day, that Stephen reported his wife Tara missing to the police. Stephen called Tara's sister Alicia and told her what had happened, but that he was getting worried because he hadn't heard from her. He said, quote, "She's probably shacked up somewhere in a hotel around the corner with some guy." And Alicia said, quote, "Stephen, she could be somewhere in the slums of Detroit and in serious trouble. She could be dead." Alicia just didn't trust Stephen at all and felt that something was off. Tara would never have walked out and left her children. It's now February 17th, and Alicia and her husband arrived in Michigan from Ohio to talk to police and pay a visit to Stephen. When they arrived at the home, Stephen came out to see them, awkwardly hugging Alicia, putting his head on her shoulder and crying. Stephen was making his rounds on the local news stations, pleading for help and oh so tearful. But it wouldn't take long before he started to bad-mouth his missing wife. To one reporter, he said, quote, "A couple of years ago, we did have a problem in our marriage. I don't want to say infidelity, but it was pretty close to infidelity." He made it sound like she was more interested in her career than her family. With all the interviews he was giving, the community was starting to feel that something was off. Remember the old girlfriend I mentioned earlier in the show that Stephen sent her emails to, where he was saying that, he could really use a sponge bath? Well, that ex-girlfriend rose to the surface with those emails. It was just 2 weeks prior to Tara's, quote, disappearance, that he sent those to her. One of them also said, quote, "I'm still in need of some excitement in my day, wink, wink. I just think of marriage vows are like speed limits. Sometimes you have to break them."
Alrighty then. It's starting to shape out that a couple of people had his creepy tentacles on them.
Yep.
Everybody's getting that, okay, did she really disappear? Like, that's the vibe that's happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're starting to be like, yeah, huh, weird. We're going to watch ya. We're going to keep our eyes on you. Now, while all this is going on, of course, Verena remained in the home with Stephen and the 2 kids. But considering everything that was going on, the agency she worked for pulled her out of the home and sent her back to Germany on February 21st, 2007. But she didn't want to go. She didn't want to leave Stephen. After all, Stephen's grooming had her snagged good. She was falling in love with him. She wanted to be there for him. She wanted to protect him. This shit's all over the news. All over the news. He is talking to anyone and everyone. He's on all the news shows, pleading, crying. You know, like he started off, oh, the so teary, upset, worried husband. And then he's starting to get kind of like, you know, because think about it. He's totally emasculated. His wife is the power breadwinner, you know, has this big, highfalutin job. He's working at his dad's tool and die shop, like Mr. Mom. And now all of a sudden he's in the spotlight. The sheriffs began surveillancing Stephen, watching his every move on the daily. They would watch Stephen every morning, and he would go to the local convenience store and buy the newspaper. They didn't have any leads or physical evidence, but they were following their gut. Something was up, and they just did not believe his story. When police followed up with a car service that Tara used through her company, they found that there was no record of her calling them that Friday night, and no record that she was picked up either. There was not any activity on her phone, and no activity on her credit cards.
So, yeah. So she came home that Friday night, and then there was no activity from anything, not even her cell phone. Is that what you said?
That's what I said.
Yeah, so, like, everything, she ceased to exist after she came home, basically.
Yep.
But he thought nothing of it because she was always disappearing in his life. So he thought nothing of it to make her disappear from everything.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
Yep. Next to their house, because they lived in this like a gorgeous, beautiful residential area. And then backed up to this gorgeous residential area was like this huge park. Huge park. And it's not like a park where it's like, this is like foresty park. This is a big place, okay? So there's a very large park close to the residence of the Grants, and with no leads, the police made a public announcement that they were going to gather a search party to search that park. And like I said, this is seriously huge. Lots of trees, lots of hills, lots of trails for hiking and biking. Like this was huge, this place. So for over 6 hours, people searched the park on foot, and helicopters were searching by air. But the search turned up absolutely nothing. Police continued to tell the community to keep their eyes open. If they were out walking on any trails, keep looking and report immediately should they see anything unusual. Well, that's just what happened. One day, a woman was out walking the trails in the same park by the Grant home. Her name was Sheila Warner. She said, quote, "I had no intention of finding anything, but something had caught her eye. It was a large Ziploc bag." She said, quote, "I had a mitten on, and I went over and picked up the bag. And you could see blood that had pooled in the bottom of the bag. I knew about the disappearance of Tara Grant, but I had no idea what it could be." She took the bag home and put it in her garage and called the sheriff. When they arrived, they looked at the bag and saw that there were metal shavings, blood, and gloves inside of it. Metal shavings. They knew that Stephen's father owned a tool and die shop, and that Stephen also worked for his father. It was determined that the blood in the bag was human blood. Now the sheriffs had what they needed for a search warrant.
And where did she find this? She found this hiking, but where was it in location?
It's in the park, by the house.
By his house.
By his house.
So he probably just threw it in his backyard. But why would he do that? Why would he throw a Ziploc bag full of bloody evidence? I mean, what kind of knucklehead is this guy?
Because he's stupid. He is a knucklehead. He's stupid,
Think about
stupid,
that.
stupid.
Well, here's a little nugget for you. Let me give you some forensic evidence in a bag.
He's
A knucklehead.
He is truly a knucklehead. It's like,
That
dude.
That sounds like he was giving them a little Easter egg hunt in his own backyard.
Yeah. Come.
Knucklehead.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's so
Go ahead.
stupid.
So what happened?
All right. So at this point in time, Tara's been gone for 3 weeks. So it's now Friday, March 2nd, just 2 days after the bag of blood, metal shavings, and gloves were found. Detectives and crime scene investigators were knocking on the door of the Grant home. With it being 3 weeks since Tara had gone missing, they weren't sure if they would find much of anything. And as you can imagine, the reporters also filled the street outside of the home. The reporters had seen the detectives had patted Stephen down, but at this time, they couldn't put him under arrest as they didn't have any probable cause. Stephen had also reached out to a reporter named Hank Winchester and had requested to be interviewed in his garage. And when Hank asked why in the garage, Stephen replied, quote, "The garage will give you a look into what I saw that day, because I was looking out one of the windows when I saw Tara leave in the town car." But the interview never happened. Detectives with video cameras were going through the house and in the garage looking for anything that could possibly help them figure out what had happened with Tara. While all this was going on, Stephen grabbed the dog leash and the dog and just started walking down the street. He passed reporters and police vehicles. With one last look over his shoulder, Stephen continued walking down the street. While CSI, which is crime scene investigators, were combing through the inside of the house, other detectives moved to the garage. One of the detectives in the garage had been there before, back on February 14th, when Stephen reported Tara missing. Now he was looking around to see if there was anything different or anything out of place from his previous visit, and something did catch his attention. There was a large green container that he didn't remember being there back on the 14th, and to him, it looked a little out of place. The container was tucked in between a bunch of the kids' toys, because it's still cold out. Like, he got all the outside toys, crammed in the garage. So he walked over to the container, lifted the lid, and saw a black plastic garbage bag. So he opened it, and then he saw another black plastic bag. So he opened that one. And now he put his bare hand inside, and something felt moist.
Why? How would you just put your hand into a dark plastic bag? Like, I would never be able to do that. That's like fear factor moment.
Right.
Like, I would never do that. Like, you don't know what's in there. I mean, yes, he's possibly looking for a dead body, by the way, because that's what they're doing there, right?
Yeah.
They're looking for evidence of a missing woman. But a big, large container, like, it could have been anything. It could have been like 10 years of sludge. Like,
I know.
I'm sorry, that just caught me because I was like, ew, I would never stick my hand in.
I know.
Like,
I know. This guy's got a big sack because, no, it's like putting your hand in a dark box or a circle.
Yeah.
Like, no,
yeah,
I'm
I
not.
would never do it.
Not doing it.
Nope,
I'm
no
not
thank
putting my hand in there. No, sir.
No, thank you. Did he at least have gloves on?
No.
I mean, he should have.
There was a bare hand.
For crib's sakes.
It was a bare hand. I mean, still even with a glove, I'd be nervous as all hell, but bare. Right in.
Oh, God. All right. You caught me on that one. That one caught me off guard. I was like, oh, no, don't do it.
So the detective saw what he thought was blood and plastic. Then he saw something else, and that something else was a bra. He stepped back and alerted the CSI team in the house to come out to the garage. CSI started cutting away at the black trash bags, cutting and pulling the bags open. What they saw was a female torso. The arms and legs were gone, and so was the head.
Oh, jeez.
At this point, the detectives quickly started looking for Stephen, but he was nowhere to be seen, and a manhunt was now in full swing. Girl.
But he took the dog with him. Where was the dog? Did anybody find the dog?
It was creepy because on the show on Discovery ID Scorned, like, they have reporters that were videoing him walking away. It was snowing real heavy. He's just casually walking. And they did one big quick turnaround and kind of looked at everybody. He's probably thinking, oh my God, I can't believe, like, A, he knows he's busted, but B, he can't believe they didn't detain him. Like, why in the hell didn't they make him sit in a car while they went through the house?
Yeah, well, they don't have any reason to detain him until they have a reason to detain him. But he knew with them searching his house, they were going to find it. So in the video where they see him walking away, he didn't have like a small satchel with him and nothing. He didn't have a backpack.
Nope.
He just the shirt on his back and the dog, by the way.
Well, he had a coat, right? He had a coat on and he had the dog. Like, he was just casually, like, he was going to take the dog for a walk.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's crazy. So with all of this that was going on at the house, Alicia and her husband, they had already gone back home to Ohio, right? And then the detectives called Alicia to ask her if she felt that Stephen would harm her. They had asked her to come back to Michigan immediately.
Where's the kids at this time? They're in the house?
I don't know where they are. It didn't really say, like, in the because I watched a couple different. I watched like 3 or 4 different types of shows about it. Did a lot of reading. It's very. They don't really say.
The au pair left.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. She's gone.
And Alicia, the sister, went back. So she went back home and she left. So there's this 6 and 4-year-old somewhere. And the father, after, well, now we're learning, obviously, mutilated their mother. Then the father just walked away in the snow with the dog and no mention of where these 2 kids are?
No, and now it's what did I say it was? It's March. They could have been in school at this point, right? Because kids are still going to school, so it could have been that they were in school. I know that the kids ended up going with Alicia and her husband, but at this point, I think they're still at home. I can't recall if this is a weekday. So if it was, the kids were at school. Now Tara's sister and her husband are coming, so this is probably at the point where they end up taking the kids. At this point, the police did not tell Alicia what they had found in the garage. They were concerned for her safety since Stephen was gone. And it was almost midnight when the sheriffs called Alicia, and it was the next morning that she had arrived back in Michigan at the sheriff's department. And this is when she learned the horrifying truth of what they had found in the container in the garage. And this is really weird too. So Stephen apparently, so he must have walked to a friend's place, but apparently borrowed this friend's vehicle. And I find that really crazy too. Like, what the hell did you say to your friend? Why you need to borrow their car? And what kind of a person would let you borrow the car? Like, everybody, I think, is already eyeballing this guy sideways, like something's up with you. But that's what happened. Borrowed a friend's car, and he headed north. Cell phone towers were pinging Stephen's phone. Now, while the detectives and the FBI are working to find Stephen, an international call came into the station. It was Verena, the old pair, calling from Germany. Through tears, she said everything Stephen said to her was a lie. She told detectives that Stephen had called her in the middle of the night. Well, it would have been in the middle of the night for her, right? Because she's in Germany. But it sounds like he called her, like, after he borrowed his friend's car and he's heading up north. But in Germany, it was the middle of the night. So he called her and confessed that he had killed Tara. He told Verena that he and Tara were arguing in the bedroom that night she came home from Puerto Rico. Verena told the detectives that Stephen said, quote, "She smacked me and she yelled at me. And I pushed her back. And she hit her head, and she was dead." The detective also confronted Verena with some information that he had learned from a group of au pairs that Verena had hung out with while living in Michigan. He asked her if there was anything she wanted to tell him about her relationship with Stephen, and she said, quote, "There is nothing." The detective kept pushing, and finally she said, quote, "We liked each other. We liked each other more than we should. And it started about 4 weeks ago. It started with just talking. Tara was always gone, and then it just happened. But it was never physical, I swear." The detective kept pushing. Then Verena said, quote, "We kissed, but that's all." After more pushing, she said that, quote, "We had oral sex, but it was just one time. And it was before all that happened with Tara. It was February 9th. When asked if this was mutual oral sex, Verena said it was just him. Verena also told detectives that Grant's call came in to her with a 989 area code, which was in northern Michigan. She felt certain that he was going to kill himself. Not only did he call Verena while he was driving north, But he also called his sister and told her that he was going to a cabin and he intended to kill himself. Stephen's sister said that he told her that he was going to Waugoshant's state cabins in Wilderness State Park in northern Michigan. And this is a place that he and Tara had camped at before. From here, from this park, you actually have a direct view of the Straits of Mackinac, which a lot of people call Mackinac, but it's Mackinac. In the car with him, Stephen had alcohol, pills, razor blades, and a toy gun that he had just purchased. He made 2 calls, one to Verena and one to his sister, and had also written 2 notes, one to each of his children. He knew his time was up and that his goose was cooked. Now that they knew where Stephen was headed, the sheriffs and the FBI headed north. They located the abandoned yellow vehicle he was driving and saw footprints in the snow. As they followed his tracks, they found him sitting in the snow against a tree, exhausted and hypothermic. He was just sitting there in his shirt, jeans, and socks. He was hallucinating and talking to trees. So I just want to back up to hypothermia, right? So when he left, he had a leather jacket on, he had shoes, this and that. But when people get hypothermic, they almost have the reverse effect. They start stripping off their clothes, which I find really interesting.
Yeah, it almost actually starts making them feel hot. Like, have you ever gotten really cold, your hands, and they feel like they're burning? Mm-hmm. Because they're so cold. So that's actually what happens. It is interesting.
Yeah, really.
It's like any other feedback loop. Whenever there's a kink in the feedback loop, then it just goes all the other way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting, but yeah.
Yeah, so soon Stephen was airlifted to the hospital. When the detectives arrived at the hospital, he was immediately placed under arrest for the murder of his wife, Tara. Stephen had plenty to say, as usual. Stephen always had to have the last word. What he had to say was recorded by the detectives. And here we go. We're going to get pretty nitty-gritty. Quote, "It's 7:45 p.m., Northern Michigan Hospital. Interview with Stephen Grant. Okay, go on to February 9th, Friday." They were in their bedroom. He was naked, getting ready for bed, while Tara was unpacking her suitcase. They began to fight about Tara's busy work and travel schedule. Tara did slap him across the face, and he hit her back. Quote, "She fell. I know she banged the back of her head on the floor, and then she said something like, 'That's it. I'm going to take the kids, and you're going to be fucking homeless. You're a piece of shit.'" At this point, Stephen lost it and said, quote, "I choked her. I grabbed her neck and choked her. She finally grabbed my hand at one point, but it was too late then. I couldn't stop it, and I knew I was going to prison. I panicked." As Stephen was strangling Tara, she was looking into his eyes, and he didn't want her looking at him. So he grabbed a piece of clothing nearby and put it over her face. Quote, "I wrapped something around her neck. I think it was my brown leather belt, and I knew I couldn't carry her, so I wrapped that around her neck. And I used it basically to pull her down the stairs." He pulled Tara into the garage, and he was still naked, right? So he's doing all this naked. He was struggling to get her into the trunk of her own SUV when he said, quote, "I dropped her. It was the most disgusting noise. It just sounded like dropping a watermelon on the cement. I knew then that I had killed her." He finally did get her in the back of the SUV, closed the trunk, and went back into the house. Not long after walking back into the house and putting on a shirt, that's when Verena walked in. Now, that's the part I touched on earlier in the show. This is when the whole sob story about his wife leaving him and, the whole feeling sorry for me bit.
Yeah, but can we just rewind for 1 second? Like, that's when he realized that he killed her, when he dropped her and heard a watermelon sound. He didn't think that he killed her when he choked her out and then wrapped a belt around her neck and dragged her down the stairs. Like, he didn't think that he killed her any of those times? I don't understand. Like, that kind of struck me. That's when you figured it out.
Right. Because he was expecting like a normal reaction of like an ouch or, yeah, she's dead, dude. Way dead.
That's a wild imagery. That's all I'm saying. Like, that's when you knew. That's when it hit you.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. God. Okay. So now to make the story seem true, Stephen started calling his wife's cell phone. He left a message for her that said, quote, "I know you're mad. I'm mad too, but you can't just leave." Padding up an alibi or, making it sound like the whole story's true, call and leave her messages in case the police get her phone, blah, blah, blah. Now, with Verena in the house, he said goodnight to the kids and headed off into the night to his father's tool and die shop. He was driving Tara's SUV with Tara in the back. Once there, he laid out plastic on the floor, placed Tara's body on top of it, and began the process of dismembering his wife. In his confession, he said, quote, "I cut Tara's hands off, and I cut to the next joint, and the next joint, and the same with her legs. At some point, I threw up, and I threw up again. And then I just told myself, look, if you don't do this, you're going to go to prison for the rest of your life." And I kept cutting her. When he was finally done, he wrapped each piece of Tara into plastic bags and placed them in a plastic bin. Quote, "I put everything. I think I put some newspaper in there because at one point there was some blood. It was real thick, like syrup." The detective said, quote, "So you had Tara's entire body in one..." And then Stephen interrupted and said, "In one Rubbermaid container." The next morning, Stephen got up super early and grabbed one of his children's sleds and placed the Rubbermaid container on it. And he headed off to that very large park, which was named Stony Brook Park. While he was standing on top of a pretty big hill, the sled did what sleds do best when something is on top of it, and it slid down the hill. He said, quote, "It was like Keystone Cops. The sled took off, and now I'm chasing after this sled that has my wife's cut-up body in it down a hill. And I finally got it stopped. And then it fell over and broke, and all these pieces have now fallen all over the place." He finally gets all the pieces of her back into the Rubbermaid container. Then he starts to bury them around the park. He was hoping that wild animals would eat at her, leaving just the bones behind, which would make it more difficult for anyone to notice. With all that being said, this wouldn't be the first time Stephen would be out in the woods moving Tara's remains. He had to move her a few times. He said, quote, "I did a very, very bad job of hiding anything. It's right there in the open." Detectives said that during his confession, Stephen's behavior was just very odd. There was no emotion. At times he would laugh, and at times he would tell jokes. When Stephen heard the announcement of the search that was going to happen in the park near his home, that's when he had gone out to retrieve Tara's torso. He initially took it to his father's shop where he put it on top in the office, like on top of maybe in the attic or something. He left it there for about a day or two, but then he removed it because he was worried it was going to start to smell. So Stephen took the container from his father's workshop, and that's when he took it home and placed it in the garage next to the toys. The next day, Stephen heard the knock at the door. It was the detectives with a search warrant in hand. Now, out of 14 body parts that were scattered about the park, only 11 were recovered. Detectives even found some of the saw blades Stephen used. They still had Tara's hair and flesh on it. Just 9 months after his arrest, Stephen stood trial for the brutal murder of his wife Tara. He was found guilty of second-degree murder and mutilation of a corpse. He received a sentence of 50 to 80 years. And just 6 months after Stephen's trial, his father committed suicide. He just couldn't handle what his son had done. Stephen and Tara's 2 children live with her sister Alicia and her husband. And every year, the kids and Tara's sister come back to Michigan to attend Tara's walk, which they created this annual walk to raise money for domestic abuse programs. Now, there is also a book called A Slaying in the Suburbs, The Tara Grant Murder, which was co-written by Stephen Miller and Andrea Billups, if you're interested in reading it. And I just want to go back because I did watch, the news was there because the kids come back every year. They're now both in their early 20s, and they are doing incredibly well. The daughter, who was just 6 at the time, her father murdered her mother. She had both of the kids had serious, heavy psychotherapy, and the daughter is actually going to college to be a psychotherapist. So
that's good. That's cool. They were well taken care of, obviously, as younger children, right? They lived in a nice home with parents that weren't sociopathic murderers at the time. And then by the time all of this happened, it seemed like they were out of the fray, because like I was asking before, like, where were the kids? They were kind of out of the fray, so they didn't see any of this They just know what they know probably from media. They probably know more about it from media than they remember experiencing.
Yeah, yeah, because
so that's actually like I'm glad for that. I know that sounds super weird to say that. Like I'm glad in any way because their mother died, but I'm glad that they weren't probably as traumatized as some of the other people that we've talked about in their childhoods, where they see the abuse on the daily in front of them.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, because everything that was so nefarious and so just horrible, they were always sleeping. They were in bed. Or, like I surmised that they were probably in school when they were searching the house, and they were well taken care of. Like you mentioned, they're living in a very upscale neighborhood. They went to private schools. And Tara, like if anybody looks her up, she was quite lovely and she had beautiful, gorgeous, naturally curly hair, kind of auburn. And looking at her kids, I don't really see much of Steven in them. I see their mom in them. They both have her hair. Good looking kids. They've really got it together. They were both asked separately. They were both interviewed separately. And both of them were asked if they ever wanted to. Do they have the need? Do they want to ever see their father, talk to their father? And neither one of them want anything to do with him. They're healthy. They don't need any closure. Neither one of them, they're like, nope. There's nothing we need from him.
Yeah.
They're good. Yeah.
And rightfully so.
Yeah, so that's the story of Tara Lynn Grant. It's pretty horrible.
It's crazy.
Come back, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in again, and keep listening. We're getting there. Did you know we are close to getting to 1,000 listens a month?
Very cool. I like that people are liking it. I love that people are listening. And I'm loving all the feedback.
Keep it coming. We appreciate you. Keep coming back. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Have a great week, and we will see you again on Wednesday for Round Robin. Bye.
Bye.